as it happens, I am the next reader. As you may know already, Michael Favala Goldman. I'm coming to you from Northampton, Massachusetts in the US. I've translated 17 books of Danish literature, including memoir and short stories by Tove Ditlevsen and 2 volumes of poetry by the Danish national poet Benny Andersen. Today, I'm going to read for the very first time in translation, I'm writing by Rolf Gjedsted. Rolf wrote 55 books during his lifetime, and he died just last summer at the age of 75. And Rolf lived part of every year in the mountains of Spain, coincidentally, in the same stone cabin that Federico Garcia Lorca lived in before he was captured and executed in the Spanish Civil War. So I've got 3 poems for you that were written at that cabin in Spain. I'll read the first stanza of the first poem in Danish and then the rest in English. Vending I bjergene. Hvis der har været årstider, eller længe siden, solen er faldet landskabet i ryggen og har brændt næsten alt liv bort. Watering in the mountains. If there have been seasons, it was a long time ago. The sun has ambushed the landscape and burned away nearly all life. For several years, no real rain has fallen, and the bit of moisture in the night is only just enough for cactus, broom, and rosemary to still flower in May. If you water the trees superficially here in this dry terrain, the roots naturally seek upward, making a bad situation worse for the grapevine and the orange tree. If you water deeply, the water pulls the root net down, but then you have to use so much of the scarce water, there's hardly enough for yourself. Therefore, the mountain farmer's eternal dilemma, according to the seasons and the ways of water, is whether to provide for his crops or to carry water for himself, and his frustration and his impossible choice, that the omission of the one will lead to thirst and hunger for them both. The lizard. The lizard crawls in and out of its hole in the olive tree, never interrupted. Through generations, a series of movements and habits, the reptile's beautiful, cool design characterizes them all and the individual. A chain of events, occurrences, and accounts which never reach any ear, which are never spoken by any mouth, but a training and a transformation by the painful or indifferent loss of a tail, the healing, the neighborhood with the snake, the rat, and the scorpion, the sounds at night of the owl, the cicada, and the dog, the blunt sound of olive fruits striking the ground, occasionally the rain, which overtakes everything, the light from the sun and the stars, the tasty crunch of insects. And this last poem, I'm pleased to say, will be the very first poem of Rolf's ever to appear in English. It's going to be published by Stanford University in their Mantis Journal this spring. This is To Keep from Burning Up. To keep from burning up, I make myself one with fire. To keep from drowning, I unite with water. to not isolate myself too often, I imagine that everything inside me transpires like everything on the outside, with certain modifications. This includes a balance between salts and fluids, temperature and nature, more than simply chemistry. When we are together, each time we open the door to a chance possibility outside of and within ourselves for a mute life waiting to gain a voice. So I can't ask myself a question really, but I'll just say how this, we come to texts in different ways. I happen to pick up a book of Rolf's poetry and in a used bookstore, and then another in another used bookstore. And I thought, this guy's got something. And so I contacted him through his website, and he invited me to visit him last spring, where he lived at Nyhavn in Denmark, in Copenhagen. And we spent a few hours together. He gave me copies of 10 of his poetry books, which are all out of print, and gave me permission to translate them. And I'm in the midst of doing that now. But just as I was getting started, he died suddenly. And so there's this bittersweet relationship that I have to these texts of him being a somewhat forgotten author, even though he wrote scores of books, and that his voice can somehow be continued or magnified through my work. So thank you for participating in that today and listening.